Call to order the May 1st meeting of the Brentwood Board of Aldermen. If you'd all rise, join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A roll call, please.
Alderman Demmett,
Here.
Alderman Kramer,
Present.
Alderman Leahy,
Here.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Here.
Alderwoman O'Neill, here. Alderman Plufka,
Here.
Alderwoman Sims, here, and Alderman Weggie.
Here. All right. Item number 3 on the agenda is approval of tonight's agenda. Are there any changes or amendments to this evening's agenda? If there aren't any from the board, the chair has a suggestion that we move item 16G1 from item 16G1 to 5, so that our friends from Cook and Riley can make a presentation and then depart the premises, so they don't have to sit here and listen to us all night long. So moved. So moved. Second.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion on amendment to the agenda? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Great. Any further changes to the agenda? If there's no objection, we'll approve it by acclamation. Great, we have an agenda. Item number 4 on the agenda is consideration and approval of the minutes. 4A are the Board of Aldermen minutes for the April 3rd meeting. There is corrected copy that's been placed on your desk. I believe that these are in fact the minutes that we would be approving or will be considering for approval. Are there any changes or additions to these minutes that have been placed at your desk? Okay. Seeing none, if there's no objection, we'll approve them by acclamation. Great, they'll be approved. 4B are the minutes from the April 17th meeting. Are there any changes or additions to those? Alderman Plufka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It mentions on page 4, under the heading Dog Park Public Forum Update, that you actually made the motion, which was seconded by Alderman Weggie. I don't think that's accurate.
Well, I certainly hope not, because that would be a gross violation of Robert's rules. So, yeah.
And then secondly, on page 5, it shows that you made the motion to adjourn.
Again, certainly hope not. We could check the tape on that, but
And I'm not...
my recommendation would be get a new mayor.
Second it.
Wow.
Wow, that went bad.
Hey, it was going.
Yes.
On page 4, under new business, the third paragraph, it establishes that the fact that the check release was received, I believe the word not received should be there. We made the exception to allow the waiver of the late fee because the check had never been received by the city. So I
Okay.
think the addition of the word not between was received should be there.
All right, that sounds like a reasonable suggestion.
Actually, not to pick at it again, but I thought the import was that the check released was received late, and instead of saying not received,
I
Change-
think
add the
actually the
word.
situation was we never got it. They could prove they sent it, but we never got it. The first check.
that's what I mean, but eventually the check was received.
It was, that's true.
That's fine.
Well, I guess what I would recommend at this point is I'd entertain a motion to table the minutes until the till the May 15th meeting.
So moved.
It's moved and seconded that we table the approval of the April 17th meeting minutes until the May 14th meeting. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Great, we'll take those up next time. Item number 5 on our agenda is a presentation from our friends at Cook and Riley. As you recall, the board approved Cook and Riley to do an analysis of the city's tax revenues. They've been hard at work for a few months now, and they've come to present the results of their analysis. So here we are.
Members of the board, Mr. Mayor, Daniel Cook of Cook and Riley. I believe you all have a copy of our report. I'd like to take care of one item of business with that. At the very top, it says that it's not a public record, and that it contains confidential information. The version that you have does not have the attachment on there that contains that confidential information. So the version that you have technically is not confidential, which just wanted to clarify that point. As far as our analysis of the sales tax revenues, our task was to look at the citywide revenues to see if there were any items that were missing, basically. So what we did is we got a ton of data from the State Department of Revenue. We had 3 years' worth of data from the Department of Revenue for 2014, 2015, and 2016. This was about 160,000 lines of data. So we culled through that, and the first thing we did was sort of do a top 25. We looked at the top 25 businesses in the city, and we determined that they paid about 73 to 74% of the sales tax revenues over this period of time. And that was a more manageable data set to start with. So we looked at, as you know, sales tax returns are filed not annually, but on a monthly basis. So for each of those 25 businesses, there would have been 36 returns filed during that period of time. So we looked to make sure that all 36 of those returns had been filed for those big taxpayers in the city, and that all of those then in turn were coded by the Department of Revenue so that the monies came to Brentwood. Because you could be paying it, but if it's not coded correctly, then it might go to a neighboring municipality, and then you're not getting the benefit of these businesses. So what our review showed, at least during this 36-month period, was that all of these, at least of the big 25, had filed 36 months worth of sales tax returns, and that the coding on that for those businesses was to the city of Brentwood. So that was correct for what we looked at. So then we sort of expanded a little bit and looked at the top 85 businesses. So we added 60 more businesses, and that got you to 90%. So those 60 businesses pay 90% sort of year in, year out of the sales taxes to the city. And again, then we went back and looked at, for those next 60 businesses, did they file for the 36 months a return that we could see, and was that return then coded to the city of Brentwood? And once again, during this period of time at least, what we found was that these were coded correctly, and that there had been returns for each of those 85 businesses for each of the 36 periods that we looked at. So that was good in that there wasn't anything significant that we could find that was missing from the Department of Revenue's distribution of these funds. We also looked a little bit at what the county distributes. That's a little bit harder because we didn't have the full level of detail from the county. Some of the taxes are remitted to you directly from the Department of Revenue, and certain others, especially the ones that are pooled with the B cities in the county, those monies are given to the county first. The county then computes how much of it goes to the pool cities, and then the rest of it is distributed directly to Brentwood, but it's then distributed by the county. So we looked at their distributions, and they were at least proportional to those distributions from the Department of Revenue. We didn't have the full data, so we couldn't do the same kind of look behind that we could for the Department of Revenue, but the fact that they were proportional suggests that at least what they were starting with was the correct amounts. Next, we kind of got a gut check. We had the city provide us with its list of business license holders. And we said, let's go look at that and make sure that all of these businesses that are paying sales tax are also showing up here. And for at least the top 85, all of those were on there. What we also found, and we've discussed this with the city, that there were people that were on the business or sales tax list that weren't on the business license list. And that's possible because you wouldn't have to have a physical location in the city of Brentwood in order to be paying sales taxes to the city of Brentwood. So you've got businesses that are selling goods and services to Brentwood businesses, charging Brentwood sales tax, but don't necessarily have a physical locale within the confines of the city. So that's at least without peeling the layers back, and that was kind of beyond what our scope was, so we didn't go much further than that other than to identify it and discuss it with the city. What we were told is in the past, the way the city has gone about looking at this is they've actually sent an intern door to door, I guess in the summer, and literally ask them for a business license going throughout the borders of the city to do that in order to confirm the license list. The other thing we looked at that we were told on the front end had happened was you guys had 2 TIFs that expired in the year 2014. And I believe that was Brentwood Point and Brentwood Square. And there would have been an expectation that when those expired, that the revenues that were previously being diverted to pay for the TIF bonds would then be coming to the city of Brentwood. And this is a little bit tricky because during the life of a TIF, there is actually separate tracking of these taxes. So during the life of a TIF, in order to be able to distribute the amounts to the city and to the developer to pay back the bonds, the Department of Revenue and the county split these funds out separately. But once the TIF expires, nobody separately tracks these anymore. It's just the way those 2 departments work. So what we had to do was kind of go back to 2013, which was the year before any of these expired, and we looked at how much was diverted to the developer in that year. And we sort of said, okay, assuming that the amount of sales don't vary from 2013 to 2014 to 2015 to 2016, or at least don't vary too much, we can get an idea of how much money should be spilling back to the city when those TIFs expire. And what we determined was that approximately $100,000 a month should have been recaptured, if you will, by the city once both of those TIFs had expired. And in our discussions with the city, I think they said that was close to the number they got. But again, because you can't actually separately track this post the TIF expirations, it's not immediately traceable. So the numbers were close, but we can't tell you with absolute certainty because the Department of Revenue and the county don't track it in that fashion anymore. That's something that maybe they should, but again, sort of beyond the scope of what we were asked to present. That pretty well summarizes what we found, is that the biggest businesses were not missing periods. They were coded properly, and that you guys should have gotten a significant amount of additional taxes once those 2 TIFs had expired in 2014. So those monies would have started coming in 2014, and then you would have gotten full 2015, full 2016, and then ongoing. Again, assuming that the revenues in these 2 areas were roughly the same as what they were in 2013, or perhaps a little bit greater. Overall, what we saw during these periods, I think from 2014 to 2015, there was a slight increase in the amount of sales taxes. It was roughly 2.5% to 3%. And then from 2015 to 2016, the revenues were nearly flat. I think they were up about 0.25% roughly, I would say, citywide. Again, that was culling through this massive pile of data from the Department of Revenue to come up with those figures. Are there any questions regarding?
Alderman Plufka.
Thank you. So, to this point, can that kind of extrapolation that you did by going back and looking at when it was being separated by the county and the state into those separate piles, and it was easier to track when the TIF, before the TIF had expired, and then after the TIF had expired, there was no similar tracking. By going back a year and looking at that, the latter half of that 14 or 13,
Right.
2013 year, can that ever form, that kind of analysis ever form the basis of some sort of effort to collect that money? I mean, it's pretty inexact, I guess, but.
I'm not sure I'm following what you mean by collect it.
Well, if the expectation was for a certain amount of dollars to come in at the expiration of the TIF, and it didn't materialize, I'm not sure. Doesn't that mean the money went somewhere else, or did it just go away altogether?
Well, I guess we would have had to maybe dig deeper to see what, maybe you could have gone back and tried to then aggregate, which we didn't do, the amount of sales that took place on a business-by-business basis to sort of piece together
Right.
On our part, maybe, or you could have recreated the revenue streams for those two TIFs and then maybe done it that way. Again, we didn't know how deep to go on this first pass, and we didn't know what your concerns were, so we wanted to get you some summary data. But it would be possible, I think, potentially that way, to go through the future data streams of those businesses, aggregate those, and see how the sales compare. But then to actually see how much of it is distributed back, we could look at how much is distributed back to the city.
Would it make any sense at the level of analysis you've done already to expend further dollars to go deeper, as you suggest we might? Would that make any practical sense for the city in terms of recouping any money that may have been diverted improperly or incorrectly?
Well, I think maybe what would be the first step there would be to just very quickly look at how much sales were in each of those two previous TIFs, and then get a gut check as to how those compare to 2013, and then get an idea then of how much we thought really should have materialized, and then see whether that's off from what was actually received.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Does that make
Alderman
sense?
Dimock.
It does. It answers my question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Following up on what Alderman Plufka was asking you, so you looked at the numbers for 2013 before the two TIFs were paid off.
We did.
And based upon that, it's your opinion that once they were paid off, the city should have realized an additional $100,000 per month, if I'm reading your memo correct?
Approximately, yes.
Is there any indication, or do you have an opinion of whether or not the city is in fact, or has in fact received that $100,000 a month?
There was definitely a large increase in revenues that the city saw from 2014 to, or I guess 2015 versus 2013. I can't tell you for sure that that's what it's attributable to, without doing something like we just talked about.
Okay, so you do believe there is some, you think there's something else that you could do in order to tie down whether that increase is a result of the paying off of the TIF versus something else?
I think there is,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
if we did something like we just stated.
And if it turns out that the increase was not a result of the TIF being paid off, but for some other reason, and we're not realizing the approximate $100,000 a month increase, what conclusion could you draw from that, if you can?
Other than, the only reason I wouldn't expect that to materialize would have been if the sales in the stores that constitute the TIF were to have diminished over time.
Well, is it possible that the money, as it's getting diverted to the state and then to the county, and then it's not coming back to the city?
That would be possible, but as I said, we looked, it would depend on, I guess we didn't, whether those were in the top 85. Most of the things in the TIF probably would have been, but maybe there were some stores that weren't, where we kind of already sort of looked at the coding, but we can definitely double check that. Because I can't tell you for certain which stores were in each of those TIFs and whether that was in that top 85 analysis that we did.
Do you have an estimate as to how much additional time your firm would need in order to undertake what Alderman Plufka was asking you to do?
I think if we were just going back and recreating the revenues for those 3 years, that we could do that in 2 to 4 hours max, I would think. It wouldn't be a bunch of extra time just to do that initial sorting.
And again, by doing that, or 2 to 4 hours, 10 hours, it's not that, we're not talking a tremendous amount of money. You would then be able to hopefully present to us your findings in terms of whether or not we are realizing an increase as a result of those TIFs being paid off.
I think that initial pass would be just to tell you that the sales were there that would support what should have been 100,000. If we have to go behind
Okay.
that and try to trace that, we're talking a little bit more time.
Well, your memo, you talked about going to Jeff City and looking at,
Well,
Is that
no, I
correct?
think here we'd probably have to, I mean, that's really almost impractical, yes.
Right.
But I think we'd have to look at just the distributions for each of those and try to see if the sales in those hadn't diminished by a significant amount, why there was a difference between the 100,000 we're expecting and the amount that you're actually receiving.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
I'm a little confused.
Sure.
The 100,000 is what we are expecting, more or less. What is the gap that you see? It's not totally 100,000 that we're missing. Are we talking 10,000 we're missing, 40,000?
I may need some help from
Karen.
Karen on this one.
I don't think there is a gap. Him and I have talked, and we did recognize a big increase. And as he said, can you attribute that to the TIF? We put in our CAFR that we, or at least prior to when I came, that the increase we saw was probably attributed to the TIFs. And we did see increases. What we didn't see is what we almost overestimated what we were going to get in the budget. So when the last few years, we ended up getting less than what we budgeted. So, but we did see increases close to what he said it had to do with the top eats, right?
Yeah.
The number on one particular page is what we were looking for, and we saw where we did get close to that. So whether or not it was attributed to the TIF, we think it was, and that's what we stated in the CAFRs prior to when I came, that it was attributed to the TIFs.
Thank you.
Mayor Thornton, if I may interject, since I was here when that happened. We did receive, and according to the memo that Karen Shaw presented that's in your packet, the city did receive 1.1 million as a result of paying those two TIFs early. And what she indicated was that we overprojected how much more we would continue to receive the following year and bump that by an additional 3%. Now, for those that were on the board at that time, if you also recall, we had a number of major revenue generators for the city that were closed for a greater portion of that year.
Yes.
We had Macaroni Grill close, we had Golf Galaxy close, we were expecting Total Wine to come on board. Total Wine didn't come on board till September. Chick-fil-A, I think, August. Then there were a bunch of other little stores in town that closed. So it was the perfect storm. So all the additional revenue that we anticipated that we would receive, we did not receive. If we go, and during that time period, we had vacancy in the finance director position. If you all remember, we had our financial consultant, Rana Alvarez.
Yes.
And she pointed that out in the August, September, October, November, December financial monthly statements. So before we start expending additional dollars that will yield no different conclusion than what is in the memo, I'm happy to make those reports for you. We can take it back to Ways and Means and discuss it a little further. I would recommend caution before we spend additional dollars that will lead to a result that's no different from what I've said, what Karen has said, and is in this memo.
Alderman Dimmitt, if I could just follow up a little bit, Mr. Chairman. So you heard Karen just in bullet say, we have seen an increase after the TIFs were paid off of $1.1 million. But what you're telling us, if I understand it correctly, is you don't know if that 1.1 is a result of the TIFs being paid off or is it a result of something else. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say, but I think what she's saying is, what else could it be?
I'm asking you, you're the expert. What else could it be?
Absent some increase in sales at other businesses, that is what you would expect it to be.
And we haven't, when we look back at the CAFRs from 2014, 2015, we don't see an increase in the sales numbers, do we?
We see an increase, but not as significant as we anticipated we would in the budget document. So when we receive additional checks
Right.
from the county, we can pull those records that show exactly where that's from.
But there's not enough of an increase in the sales that would justify the increase of $1.1 million.
That much of an increase would be inexplicable but for the expiration of the TIFs.
Okay. So it's reasonable to conclude that the 1.1 that we, like Karen said and as Bull said, is a result of the TIFs being paid off early.
That's certainly what I would be led to believe.
Okay. That's all.
Any further questions? All right, well, I just want to thank you, gentlemen, very much for the report. Very good job. We're very happy to have had you do that for us. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we are at item number 6 on the agenda tonight. We have 2 proclamations. The first is National Police Week, is May 15th to May 21st, and I've asked Alderman Kramer to read the proclamation.
Surely, Your Honor. In recognition of National Police Week, whereas the Congress and President of the United States have designated May 15th as Peace Officers Memorial Day, and it's also the week which it falls as Police Week, whereas the members of the Brentwood Police Department play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of the citizens of Brentwood, and whereas it is important that all citizens now and they know and understand the problems, duties, and responsibilities of their police department, and that members of our police department recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression and intimidation. And whereas the Brentwood Police Department has grown to be a modern and scientific law enforcement agency, which increasingly provides a vital public service. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Christopher A. Thornton, call upon the citizens of the city of Brentwood and upon all patriotic, civil, and educational organizations to observe the week of May 15th through the 20th, 2017, as Police Week, with appropriate ceremonies in which all of our people may join in commemoration of the police officers past and present, who by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered a dedicated service to the Brentwood community, and in doing so have established themselves as enviable and enduring reputation for preserving the rights and securities of all citizens. I further call upon all citizens of the city of Brentwood to observe May 15th, 2017 as Peace Officers Memorial Day, that to honor these peace officers who through their courageous deeds have lost their lives or become disabled in the performance of duty. Done at this city of Brentwood, the 15th day of May, 2017.
Thank you. So, May 15th through 21st, National Police Week. And if you are a member of any organizations that would like to have an event that would honor our police officers, I encourage you to take that up and do it. Maybe the Boy Scouts. I know there's a couple organizations that already have events planned. So.
Your Honor, we have a meeting that night also.
Oh, do we?
Yes.
Oh, well, there's a good idea. All right. We have a second proclamation. It is National Public Works Week. National Public Works Week is May 21st to May 27th, and I've asked Alderman Kramer to read that proclamation.
Yes, Your Honor, in recognition of National Public Works Week, whereas the public works facilities and services are of vital importance to the health, safety, and overall integral part of the people of the city of Brentwood. And whereas such facilities and services could not be provided without the support of an informed citizenry and the dedicated efforts of public works professionals, administrators, and personnel representing all levels of government, who are responsible for and must plan, design, construct, operate, and maintain transportation, refuse disposal, sewer laterals, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential to serving our citizens. And whereas the efficiency of the qualified and dedicated personnel who staff public works functions is materially influenced by the people's attitude and understanding of the importance of the work they perform, and whereas the theme for this year's celebration is Public Works Connect Us, and 2017 marks the 57th Annual National Public Works Week, which is sponsored by the American Public Works Association. And now, therefore, I, Christopher Thornton, Mayor of the City of Brentwood, do hereby proclaim May 21st through the May 27th as National Public Works Week in the City of Brentwood, Missouri, and I call upon all citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved providing our public works and to recognize the contributions which public works officials make every day to our health, safety, comfort, and quality of life. Presented this day of May 2017.
Oh, thank you. And you'll all be getting a chance to meet some of our very fine public works people as we get out and pave most of the streets in Brentwood this summer.
19 of
So 19 of them, yeah. There's going to be a lot of them going on. So you'll have ample opportunity to thank them, and I encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity. All right. Item number 7 on the agenda. We have 2 public hearings this evening. They are related, but there are 2 separate sections of our planning and zoning code that are being amended. So what I thought I'd do is go a little bit out of order here. I thought what I'd have do is Director Kirkemeyer come up and explain what's going on here to the board. Then we'd have the public hearing, get public comment, and then when we go and do the reading of the ordinances, we can just kind of skip her part of it and go straight to the ordinances, so. All right.
Thank you. So, yes, I hope we didn't confuse anyone. We're actually trying to think of the more simpler way to present this. So, as the mayor said, there are 2 amendments that are proposed for the Urban Development UD District, zoning district. But we had packaged it up to be one case that was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission at their April meeting, and with one public notice advertising the text amendments. But the attorney had prepared separate ordinances for each amendment. So anyway, but again, I would like to go ahead and probably just keep my comments in one presentation if I could for both amendments. So as I had mentioned in April, the Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed proposed text amendments to amend Chapter 400.1400, the UD Urban Development District, specifically 400.1400D, in order to require site plan approval for alterations, expansions, or changes to existing buildings within the UD Development District, and clarify the application of setback requirements to such existing buildings, and also then an amendment to 400.1400E to allow greater flexibility with regard to building height and size, but not to the setbacks and lot coverage in the UD district. So to give you a little bit of background, in 1999, the city actually first formulated the urban development zoning district. So the UD district is intended by site plan approval and other procedures set forth in the section to encourage the development of multifamily residential, retail, or office uses or combinations thereof. In fact, it states that the purpose of the UD district is to provide for a scale and flexibility of development which could not otherwise be achieved through fixed single-use zoning districts. So to date, there's only really been one other text amendment to the UD district, and that was shortly after it was adopted in 1999. In 2000, it was reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission and approved by the Board of Aldermen that they amend the regulation that dealt with parking standards in the UD district. And the reason why I do want to point that out is because, in a sense, that's exactly kind of why we're proposing these 2 text amendments now to the district. So the parking requirements were addressed, and basically instead of in the UD district going back to the very standardized, if you've got this type of use, you need to have this many parking spaces, et cetera, the code was changed to allow a greater flexibility so that basically developments, because you're encouraging mixed-use development, would be looked at overall, and so therefore, if we adjusted the parking standard requirement, it would be based more on like a development or a case-by-case basis. So in essence, that's kind of what we're asking for consideration of with these 2 requirements, or these 2 amendments. So since the adoption of the UD zoning district, the city of Brentwood has approved 3 UD districts. So we have the Villas, Hanley Station Development, and then most recently the Metro on Manchester project. So the reason why, again, I want to state that is if you think about those 3 projects, each one of those developments are very different from each other in terms of what type of uses they're comprised of, what different site considerations they have, and even as far as what are the adjacent land uses and zoning districts around those developments. So I point that out because, again, it's kind of hard to just go back with very cookie-cutter standards on all of your area bulk requirements in the UD district when you're looking at projects that are very different from each other. So with these amendments, it's recommended that the UD district be amended to allow greater flexibility with regard to the building height and size and reviewing the site plans for each development on a case-by-case basis, taking into consideration each development's proposed mixed use, special site conditions, and site considerations. So, as I said, much like what was proposed for the parking requirements. So, the other thing that I'd like to point out is that we're also starting to have interest in rezoning to the UD district of a rezoning petition by more than one parcel or one property owner. And I think the city of Brentwood needs to keep encouraging that If you look over to the zoning map that is on the wall over there, if you can look at Hanley Industrial Court, we all know where that's located. All of that orange area on the zoning map is light industrial. And so in order to encourage the conversion of light industrial district to be what the 2006 comprehensive plan calls out, which is supposed to be community mixed use or regional mixed use, we need to start encouraging some of that light industrial zoning district to either go to UD or to PD. So the one thing is we want to encourage multi-property owner, multi-parcel petitions for those rezonings. That will get us from starting to look at each individual parcel and development to maybe doing things more that, again, the adjoining property owners could start making some changes to their properties that would be the benefit to all. So in order to actually encourage that, we want to make sure we clarify one thing in the UD district, because as it states right now, any existing building in a UD district is still supposed to, if they had any changes or expansions, they are still supposed to submit a site plan. But there's also then a contradiction in the UD district that says if it's like a multi-petition and so forth, and there's no changes, they don't have to submit a site plan at that time. So again, we want to still say that come in as part of the petition, and then when you get ready to do something with your property, you still would be subject to the full site plan review by the PZ and the Board of Aldermen. So we're just wanting to try to correct, and I guess it's just not very clear, the way it's written now. So I think that's probably all I have right now. I guess just in summary, as I said, this was presented to Planning and Zoning at the April 12th meeting. It was approved 11 ayes to 1 nay. And the last thing I probably would say, I know we're undertaking the comprehensive plan process right now, and I would say that I would encourage these revisions at this point in time to the UD district. However, I will say that once the comp plan process is done, I can probably assume that there might be some more things we want to go back and look at the UD district. But I think this at least points us in the right direction of where we need to head anyway. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Director Gergemeyer? Alderman Leahy.
Was any of this submitted to the comprehensive stakeholders and different groups?
The actual zoning changes?
Yes.
The zoning changes would not have been. In terms of the idea of why we would recommend these changes, again, looking at the reuse and reconversion of the Hanley Industrial Court and those kind of things. So we're drawing from that, but I will admit that usually you do your comprehensive plan process first, and then you follow up with zoning recommendations that would implement it. So these text amendments have not been presented at the public meeting, other than Planning and Zoning.
So are we jumping the gun by doing text amendments before we see the finalized revision of the comprehensive plan? And maybe we should slow up a little bit? Am I hearing you correctly, or am I misunderstanding?
I think, again, we're going to keep the urban development zoning district even after the comprehensive plan process is over. And from all indications, we've had 6 or 7 now public meetings, and the vision for the community still echoes a lot of what's in the 2006 plan. I don't see a lot of deviation there. It's just how do we get there? And I still would say that it would be, my professional opinion is that it's okay to move forward with these particular amendments at this time.
If I change my light industrial area over to the UD, I do not have to conform to the setbacks. That's what these things tell me.
If you're an existing building.
Yeah, we get to take what's there, we'll rezone you, put you under as to what your current setbacks are, because you're not gonna rebuild your building. So you've given the board the freedom of saying, yeah, we can go ahead and do this because we don't have to reconstruct something.
Except for if they went back to do expansions or alterations, those would have to be done in conformance with the current UD requirements.
So if they tore their building down and wanted to put up something different, then we get back into the different setbacks depending on size of lots and all of this and heights.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
Alderman Dimmitt.
Is the chair wanting questions specific to these now, or do you want this, does the chair want them later on and when we take these up at the first reading?
I think it's probably helpful to have those questions now. We just had the presentation, the information's fresh, and it may spur comment from the public.
Okay. Lisa, some of the changes here, as I'm reading these correctly, is to eliminate the height and bulk requirements or restrictions for the UD. Is that right?
Yes, again, those would be more on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. So if that takes place, what limitations are there on, hypothetically, a building that somebody want to come in 10 stories, 12 stories, that under the code that we have it now would be prohibited if it's on a certain, if it didn't have the right acreage. But by eliminating those height restrictions, if I'm reading correctly, it's a very subjective standard.
I don't know if I would say it's subjective, because I think what still pushes it back into the place where it needs to be is all of the other considerations you need to properly do for a quality development. So again, if you get to be 10 stories high and yet you're trying to fit that on a 1/4 acre parcel, that's pretty much an exaggeration. But it's going to be very, very unlikely that development could ever be laid out for quality and still be able to meet, to have all of the other all the other standards met. So again, parking, landscaping, open space. I mean, something again is just not going to work when you're trying to put too much density on a small parcel.
And the UD has been used 3 times so far, since '99.
Correct.
And we're anticipating that we're going to use it a lot more, and that's what's kind of driving this, wanting to change this. And is that correct?
Yes, either the UD zoning district or the PD.
Okay.
And there are differences between those two, if anybody wants me to go through that, but
So this isn't being driven by any problems that P&Z has come across or staff's come across in the past? Is that right? It's more that,
except for maybe, I will say, except for some places where it just doesn't seem like it's very clear in the code. So, the one that we talked a little bit about, again, was just if, based again back on building density or the height of how far you can go. Right now, in fact, you have your area bulk requirements laid out in a table and then kind of narrative farm. And even that's like, you only really need one or the other. But anyway, the table points out about if you have this much total acreage, then you can go this height with your building. But it's kind of open to interpretation if you mean just the parcel that's to be built upon, or if it's the district size as it comes in. So those are other things that we're trying to, as well, just dispel anything that's not clear. And
okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Lockman.
Kind of follow up on Alderman Dimmitt. Was there any discussion during the commission when they looked at this, and maybe forming 2 types of UD, where maybe the one we have currently would stay in place, call it an A, that maybe abutted residential areas so that we could watch the height of the structures, and then maybe doing a B that would be more useful in the Hanley Industrial Court, where the sky could be the limit as far as the height of the structure.
sure. I think, again, that would be another way to approach to try to achieve the same effect. As the amendments, though, have been written, those are some of the criteria, the factors that you would look at to determine what is appropriate. So it's not like that's not taken into consideration if you're abutting a residential area versus light industrial. So if you actually look through the amendments themselves, it really states how the building bulk and height restrictions are going to be determined. Doesn't put it into a standard cookie cutter form, but says here's the factors that we're going to look at based on site considerations, adjoining land uses, the whole list there. So
Alderman Waggy.
So just to clarify, I think this is true, but just want to verify. So we are not removing any site plan approvals from this step. We're basically saying if it doesn't comply with the setbacks and kind of what's in 400.1400, it's allowed not to comply for existing, but it would still go through a whole site plan process with P and Z and then the Board of Aldermen, correct?
That's
So that we
correct.
still have the oversight opportunity on this. It doesn't, okay. thank
And
you.
that still is in the code, and so we're not obviously recommending to remove that. There are some contradictions, I think, the way it's actually written, but no, that's exactly right. So even existing buildings, if you're going through any alterations, enlargements, expansions, would still go through site plan approval, and we want to make sure everybody understands that. That it's very clear.
Thank you.
Alderman Leahy.
Your Honor, can I ask the city attorney a hypothetical question regarding this?
If the city attorney will have it.
You bet.
Thank you, sir. If we remove height restrictions and we get a proposal in front of us, since we have nothing in our code that says his 12-story building isn't acceptable, and we decide that we don't like his 12-story building and vote him down, he takes us to St. Louis County to appeal our decision. Since there's nothing in the code that says he can't be 12 stories or higher, doesn't he stand a better chance of having the county courts agree with him and overrule our decisions? Because I'm not following my code now. I'm subjective.
These districts are standalone zoning districts. So the decision, if I'm not mistaken, so that the decision to zone property to them and adopt the plan for them are legislative decisions of the Board of Aldermen, not administrative decisions. And as such are reviewed with the presumption that the board has exercised its broad legislative discretion in a reasonable and rational manner and is presumed correct until overcome by contrary evidence. So the fact that you can't hang your hat on the code won't let me do it, I don't think markedly changes the standard of review or the likelihood of success on if the decision is subjected to judicial review.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Alderman Dimmitt.
Lisa, other municipalities, how have they handled UD like this? Do they have the similar approach that is in front of us?
So when we pulled the other municipalities, and even looked a little bit beyond just our neighboring communities, I don't think anyone else has exactly urban development. You know, it's not called the same.
Right.
But what I think you're asking for is when you still break down their zoning code and read what the intent and purpose is and how it's structured, is there something similar? So to that, you know, I would say yes. And there are certainly other neighboring codes that also have this, I think you phrased it very well, but it does allow more discretion or the review to take place based on just what's kind of occurring around that site. So they may be called different things, but now the Plan Development Overlay District, you know, we're going to keep that as well. And that operates a little bit differently because that does still go back to having some of the, you know, more of the standard zonings. But then also the way that comes into play is if you remember, you still get bonus coverages, for instance, if you meet a certain thing. So the plan development, even the way Brentwood code is structured, has some similarities between those two. But again, I can go into the marked differences if you want, but so this is kind of used, you know, very routinely.
Okay, all I'm getting to is that there are other municipalities that have take this type of approach in terms of the degree of flexibility that's being proposed here.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Thank you. I'm looking at the word appropriate. When we look at something and say that's not appropriate for the site, that's a judgment call. It's not cut and dried. Clayton is getting, I think, a 33-story building. We don't have a city identity. We've been talking about this a bit. There's no central tone for Brentwood, so the idea of what's appropriate then becomes pretty nebulous. So does the new comp plan deal with this, or how does the decision of what is appropriate get made?
Right, I mean, that's a good question, and again, that has been coming up time and time again as one of the more crucial I guess, issues we need to figure out as a community. So it is being addressed. Unfortunately, we haven't still had a lot of deliverables yet from our consultants to really kind of prove that, I guess. But that is definitely part of this implementation, is to not only take what people's visions and ideas are, but then incorporate that into meaning something. And then how, again, do you actually, go and apply that throughout your community? So, that's almost the trickier part. But yes, that is the product of a comp plan and an expected deliverable product from the comp plan from our consultants.
If I may, when a court reviews a decision on these kinds of standards, where the criteria is whether or not the proposal is appropriate, it's going to be a contextual decision. What is it that's adjacent? What is the comprehensive plan vision for that area and adjacent areas? What is the specific proposal to which you are responding? What did we articulate as being appropriate or inappropriate when we made the decision? Is it appropriate in terms of the fact that it is adjacent to the interstate highway versus adjacent to a residential subdivision of bungalows? Those kinds of decisions are contextual, and the fact that they are broad, again, when you're exercising legislative discretion, this gives you the latitude to make that judgment, which the folks elected you to do. But we need to articulate in the course of it what it is we found appropriate or inappropriate and can identify that. If this was across the street and down the block, it might be appropriate, but here it is looming over these adjacent land uses. It is too intense. We need 4 lanes of traffic and it's a 2-lane street, whatever, those kinds of decisions. The law uses the term reasonable, which you could substitute here, and we've been getting away with that for 200 years.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions for Director Kirkemeyer? I'd just like to add 2 things. One, if anybody's looking for a 1/4-acre lot on which to build a 10-story building, I am more than happy to make mine available. It's at Brentwood and White, premium location. Somehow I don't know if that'll happen. In all seriousness, though, I think, I think Lisa hit the nail on the head when she analogized this to the Plan Development Overlay District that we currently have and we've used very effectively for a number of years. This puts a tool in our planning development quill that is similar to that, analogous. I don't want to say like it because it doesn't function in the same way, but it's analogous to that, and it gives us the ability, basically everything hinges on the site plan and how the site plan reads on to the comprehensive plan. That's how these decisions will be made. You take the site plan and you read it onto the comprehensive plan, and then, it's a judgment call. But that's why we have a Planning and Zoning Commission. I think they do a hell of a job, and that's, we're here as a backstop to them, right? If they get it wrong, then we get it right. So, I just think it's a very effective way to do things, but by definition, we do it right. So I think it's a very effective way to do things, and it does make people a little nervous because it is a little more squishy, but I think it gives us a very effective tool, and I think if you want to see the types of things that we've talked about take place, you're going to have to get a little more comfortable with squishy to make those things happen. Alderman Leahy.
Last question, if I may, Your Honor. In the memo that came with 6124 on the last page, am I reading it correctly that a person could acquire a few parcels and come to the city making a request, I want to change my light industrial over to a UD district, and make that a petition to the board without presenting any plans?
So, yes, if they want to go through a petition to rezone, they could do that. 1 parcel, multi-parcels, 1 property owner, multi-property owners. And if again, there is no plans to expand at that time, then there's nothing to submit. But whenever there would be enlargements or, again, expansions.
So they could come to the board. I want to pick up 3 parcels along Strossner, and I want to look at potentially doing something. But to make my project work, you guys have to redefine my zoning to UD. But I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to put on those 3 parcels. I just need to know if the city would entertain accomplishing it. That could come to the board with no other meat and potatoes.
Well, and that's true for other communities, how they do zoning. I mean, a rezoning petition, the way, again, some other towns do it, there are other communities which you may not be interested in, but what I want to point out is that sometimes you don't know the particular use for that property. You just know that once you rezone it to that, anything that's permissible in that district would be allowed, right? So in this case, again, then, what's still encouraging the rezoning does is that there's not going to be a lot of folks that are going to want to go out and just automatically change their light industrial to UD, because the UD is very restrictive when it comes to permitted uses. It's the most restrictive one that we have. Planned development allows almost anything. So there's not going to be any reason for for a light industrial property owner to just say, I'm going to just increase my property value, for instance, and go in there to get UD. Because one thing is, they're probably more than likely, whatever use or using for that property would then be a non-conforming use in the UD district. So I don't see that there would be this rush to.
Okay, but currently, under the code, if either of these bills are adopted, I change my zoning when you bring the proposal to me saying, this is what I want to do on the parcels. But this says I could change the zoning without telling the board what it is I want to do on the parcels.
Yes, that's true.
Thank you.
Any further questions? All right. Thank you, Director Germeyer. All right, I'm going to gavel in the first of 2 public hearings. The first one is on text amendment to P&Z number 17-05. I now open public comment on text amendment P&Z number 1705. Anyone care to address the board on this amendment? Going once? Nope. All right.
Is that the ones that Lisa's been talking about?
Yeah, so these, I'm sorry, these 2 text amendments, 1705, they're both numbered 1705. They amend 2 slightly different sections of the code, but yes, they're if you have any comment, feel free to. What you say will likely be applicable to both.
I'll get up here eventually. So, I am, still trying to understand how everything works with planning and zoning. So Lisa, I don't know if some of these questions I have would be appropriate or not. And I'm just asking them to try and educate myself. But I have attended a couple of planning and zoning meetings where there is a development coming through that sounds like some similarities to what we're trying to solve here with the 2 proposed amendments that are in front of you. And I guess my question is whether this will address some of the questions that some of the P&Z members that have been on the commission for a while had in concern to how those 2 developments were coming forward. And I did think one of those developments were asking to be rezoned as UD, and this is where I was not I'm not following all of the conversations that are happening, but I thought that there were several members that felt that if we gave that to them, we lose some leverage in being able to work with what they bring forward. And so I guess, Lisa, I would want to understand if this will take care of that. I don't know. I like the idea of having flexibility for developers when they come in here. I do think that presents challenges for some of our commissions and for you all when you actually have to approve something. And some examples that we can have is maybe sort of how the Architectural Review Board has had to work when people bring things forward to them, and that might be a different type of a committee, but I think they have, one of their criteria that they look at is whether the proposed changes that are being made to a property is in line with what's going on in the community. So there's kind of a subjective thing there. And there was recently, for example, something that was approved on Lewis Avenue, and it's just a huge property that impacts the lighting, and it's takes up a lot of their green space. And I think the Architecture Review Board applied a reasonable process to try and understand whether that was the right thing to put in there. But it really doesn't, if you step back and look at it in comparison to the rest of the neighborhood, it really doesn't fit. And so I do think when you don't have some criteria, when it's more subjective, I do think it does place a burden on our city. And I might also comment that, you know, from what I've seen in some of the comments that have made through the comprehensive plan process, you know, a lot of the residents are concerned about what's happening with green space and density, and they want to be able to, you know, make sure that what we're going to be developing in the future helps us maintain what we do have here, which is a certain look and feel. But I don't know that we've actually defined that yet, to Alderman O'Neill's comment. And so I don't know if this is coming too quickly, like if it wouldn't make more sense to see what the comprehensive plan brings forward as far as what the community really wants us to look like before we start approving these kinds of things. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to address the board? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment on the first of the two. And I'm going to open public comment on the second of the two. Anyone care to come forward and address the board on the second text amendment, which accomplishes much the same thing in a different section of the code? All right, seeing none, I'll close public comment on the second text amendment. All right. Item number 8 on the agenda, we don't have any bids this evening that I'm aware of. Item number 9, we have a hearing of any matter of public interest upon the request of any person present. If anyone would like to come forward and address the board, please give us your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes. This doesn't have to be about text amendments. It can be about any subject you want. Okay, seeing none. Item number 10 on the agenda, unfinished business. I don't believe we have any this evening. Item number 11, bills to be given a first reading. We have several. Is it just my agenda that goes straight to 11C?
No, mine doesn't.
All of them did, yes.
All right, well, we're going to stick with the lettering that's on the agenda, but we're going to start with C. So you'll just forgive me for skipping A and B. So item number 11C is bill number 6123. Mr. City Attorney, first reading by title only, please.
Bill number 6123, first reading, an ordinance approving site plan approval for a signage plan for 2525 South Brentwood Boulevard, providing for the enforcement of this ordinance and establishing the effective date of this ordinance.
Thank you. Alderman Kramer, do we have synopsis?
Yes, Your Honor, a little further information. Bill number 6123, the first reading. Our planning and zoning number 17-04, the amendment to the comprehensive signage plan regarding sign elevations. This is for Birthright Counseling, located at 2525 South Brentwood Boulevard. And that property is governed by a signage plan that was approved by the Board of Aldermen back in 2010. The 2 existing 8-square-foot wall signs for Birthright Counseling on the north and south elevations of the building were approved as part of the original signage plan for the property. Birthright Counseling is requesting an amendment to the signage plan to remove the 2 existing 8-foot square panel wall sign cabinets on the north and south elevations of the building and replace them instead with signage consisting of new channel letters. The proposed new signs are each 21.75 square feet in size. Our Planning and Zoning Commission has reviewed and recommended the approval of the changes contained in Bill number 6123.
Thank you. Let's see, I think Director Kirkemeyer is back on this one.
So actually, that synopsis just about covers everything. The only thing probably else to add to that is the building at 2525 South Brentwood has 3 tenants. So it's got the Refine Room, Birthright Counseling, excuse me, and the National Leasehold. I believe the National Leasehold is the business of the person who owns the property. So I just wanted to let you know that the building is 100% occupied, because I didn't know if the question would maybe come up as, would there be more, more requests for signage? So I would assume that this is probably what's going to work for that building for the time being. I know the National Leasehold really doesn't need any of the visibility or some of the signage that's right along Brentwood. Other than that, I think, again, the synopsis pretty well covered it. It did go to the April 12th, I think, Planning Commission meeting and was approved unanimously, so.
Are there any questions? Alderman Plufka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I understand it, the three tenants are east to west, and the refined room is most east, and then the birthright is sort of in the middle, and then leasehold offices are at the back, so to speak, or at the farthest west end?
So I think this is how it lays out. The refined room takes up a lot of the first floor space, but they've also now expanded on this second floor. They take up more room on the second floor. And then the birthright counseling takes up more of the, I guess, back portion of the building, a large portion of the building on the first floor. And then I believe the leasehold has maybe a small space.
So here's my question with the alignment of the signage on the north-facing wall. Does it seem confusing at all that you've got the awning for the refined room directly below where the lineup of this sign might be, so that people might be confused as to, in other words, two advertisements for two different businesses sort of aligned over that one door that goes to the refined room only? And have there been any thought given to moving the birthright signage a bit to the west to more align with where its property is?
Yeah, I guess
Or where it's
the one comment I would
opposite.
make is that really you go back to the back area there to park the car.
Right.
So there is some detailing, I don't know if it's door signage that Birthright Counseling
There is.
has. So I think if you went back to park your car, you would see the entrance to Birthright. But that doesn't totally dismiss, I don't think, either your comment, but I think they would know what door would be the main door for the Birthright Counseling. so.
That's the only question I have. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Director Kirkmeyer? I have one. Oh, well, maybe two. Maybe two. So did I hear this correctly? They're going to remove the cabinet signs on the north and south of the building?
Correct.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't placing a sign on the south side of that building violate our current sign code?
How would that be?
It doesn't face a street?
So that would be the advantage to having a comprehensive signage plan, is that you get, again, everything's looked at for the building, so you can come in and request things that aren't just your typical signage requirements.
Does that answer my question? I'm not sure if it does.
It's the urban district of signs.
I guess you could put,
So are we, is the urban district of signs in effect, or is our current sign code in effect, I guess is my question.
so the comprehensive sign plan is what governs this property, because they got it back in 2010. So that's why that comes before the P and Z and to the Board of Aldermen, because you already authorized the comprehensive signage plan. So if there's any changes to those proposed, that comes through the whole process again. If it's not under a signage plan, if a property is not under a signage plan, then just our conventional signage regulations apply, and you don't ever see that. We just issue that internally by our office.
Interesting. All right, that answers my question. Thank
Did
you.
you have two?
Huh?
Did you have two?
No, that pretty much took care of it. Do you have one?
Sure.
Alderman Wakey?
I'll fill the void. What's, can you remind me what the requirement like for square footage, right? So we're looking at approximately 22 square feet on the side. What is the, yeah, there's a maximum size or something, right? And I'm thinking back to my Board of Adjustment days,
Well,
not to put you on the spot.
yeah, I don't know exactly. It is measured based on linear property frontage, storage front, or store frontage. So I don't know that offhand. And then again, it doesn't always mean necessarily that you would be able to have that on every side of the building, because as you pointed out, there's some times where you're only basically allowed one wall signage, for instance, for, each building. So I don't know, I would be guessing on the, what would be typically
So
allowable.
Have we modified our signage plan? So I'm thinking about, as I was driving up and down Brentwood, kind of looking, so the new dry cleaner that went in the old Shoe Stop, Shoe Stop had a high sign that said Shoe Stop, and now the new one is the smaller pedestal, much better, I might say.
Correct. The ground mounted
Have we
sign.
amended, or have we changed our signage criteria for based on those taller signs? Because
Yes, very much. Pole mounted signs are no longer
no longer allowed.
permitted.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Since this is first reading, I understand your question. I can bring that answer back to the next meeting if you'd like.
I can look it up, too.
Okay.
Yeah, and it sounds like it doesn't have to comply, it only has to comply with the comprehensive sign plan that they got approved, right? So, yeah, I don't know if you can do that calculation, because you'd have to know what their comprehensive sign plan is.
Well, and a comprehensive sign plan also, gets originally locked in, so obviously there's overall total sign areage that is calculated, but then again, that can be amended if they go through the process, so.
Okay. Oh, Alderwoman O'Neill.
All right, so I'm not sure if there was an answer, because Alderman Wiggy's question seems like mine. It looks as though they are doubling the size of the sign, and these look really large. And is that?
Yeah, so there's two signs that would be removed and replaced with two signs in close proximity of the old signs. But the sign area has increased. The existing signs, right, it's about triple.
It
It's,
went from
instead of
8 square feet to
square
22 square.
Yeah,
feet
so-
for each
So
sign.
is that according to code or not? I'm not getting I'm not understanding your answer. You're saying
So
you don't
again,
know.
under a comprehensive signage plan, you can ask for greater signage allowance than what just the conventional code allows. So, but that being said, I think maybe Alderman Weggie wanted some comparison, like what would the conventional sign code allow? And I just don't have that, but we can
But
find out.
we've got time.
Yeah.
Yes, the research would be helpful.
We'll have it in time for discussion next month,
Okay,
or next meeting.
anything else?
I think we're good. Thank you. We'll see you again in 2 agenda items. Right. 11D is bill number 6124. Mr. City Attorney, first reading by title only, please.
Bill number 6124, first reading. An ordinance amending subsection D of section 400.1400 of the city's zoning code pertaining to site plan approval requirements in the urban development district in order to require site plan approval for alterations, expansions, or changes to an existing development within the district.
Thank you. Alderman Kramer, synopsis?
Yes, Your Honor. Subject of a previous public hearing, this is Bill number 6124, our first reading, Planning and Zoning number 17-05, covers an ordinance amending subsection D of section 400.1400 of the city's zoning code pertaining to the site plan approval requirements in the urban development district. That in order to require site plan approval for alterations, expansions, or changes to an existing development within that district. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed proposed text amendments to amend Chapter 400.1400, the UD Urban Development District, specifically 400.1400D, in order to require site plan approval for alterations, expansions, or changes to existing buildings within that UD Urban Development District, and to clarify the application of setback requirements for such existing buildings, and 400.1400E, to allow greater flexibility with regard to building height and size, but not setbacks or lot coverage in the UD district. It's recommended the Board of Aldermen consider the UD district to be amended, which would still require site plan approval by the Board of Aldermen, utilizing the site plan approval process on the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission for all proposed developments, alterations, expansions, or changes within the UD district. However, the ambiguity of a sentence stating that existing buildings and uses within the UD district shall be exempt from this requirement where the construction contemplated is due to expansion and improvement of a single property, provided the applicable development standards are met and the proposed improvement would not cause the violation of any pre-existing conditions of approval for the existing property, would be deleted. If you followed all of that, congratulations. That is all contained within the language of Bill number 6124.
There's a whole other
All
paragraph.
right, and we've had,
Well, there is another paragraph.
I'm sorry.
Please read on.
Stand by. Here comes part two. Additionally, if that wasn't enough, the board shall consider amendments allowing greater flexibility with regard to building height and size and reviewing the site plans for each development on a case-by-case basis, taking into consideration each development's proposed mixed use, special site conditions, and site considerations. The present UD district building regulations are not clear if the bulk and height of buildings as regulated by acreage size is to be applied by the size of the parcel or the size of the district. The amendment would allow the bulk and height of buildings to be determined by the appropriateness of the particular parcel on which they are located and be consistent with the character of surrounding developments and the purposes of the UD district. Our Planning and Zoning Commission has reviewed all the language contained within this Bill number 6124 and recommends approval.
All right, thank you. And we've already had numerous discussions and questions about this. So, and actually, if the board will forgive me, I'm going to now go out of order on our agenda. I'm going to jump to 11H. And I'll throw the city attorney a curve, but I'm going to ask him to read bill number 6129, first reading by title only, please.
Bill number 6129, first reading, an ordinance amending subsection E of section 400.1400 of the city's zoning code pertaining to building regulations for developments within the urban development district.
All right, and in taking mercy on Alderman Kramer, we're gonna take the synopsis as read. So that will take care of 6124 and 6129 first reading.
Yes, sir.
So we'll take those up next time. That brings us to 11E, which is bill number 6125. Mr. City Attorney, first reading by title only, please.
Bill number 6125, first reading, an ordinance amending several provisions of the city's municipal code, chapter 215, offenses involving hours of construction, and chapter 500.010.020.080, regulations governing construction.
Thank you. Alderman Kramer, synopsis.
Yes, Your Honor. Bill number 6125, housekeeping, has some improvements here. The first reading only, amendments to Chapter 215, offenses, Article 16, offenses involving hours of construction, and Chapter 500, building regulations, Article 1 in the general, to determine reasonable enforcement of construction hours and if construction activities are occurring outside of the prescribed construction hours. Further detail, our city code of ordinances includes restrictions on construction hours. Presently, the code addresses the construction hours in two sections of the code, Chapter 215, offenses, Article 16, offenses involving hours of construction, and Chapter 500, buildings and building regulations, Article 1 in general, Section 500.020, construction hours. Those two sections state different hours of construction, contradict each other presently. Therefore, one of these must be deleted. Additionally, there must be a clear understanding of what constitutes construction activity in order to determine if construction is occurring outside of the city's prescribed construction hours and therefore is a violation of the code and has occurred. The proposed amendments of Chapter 500 would define construction activity as, quote, any activity which progresses or contributes to the completion of the construction on the job site. Such activities shall include, but are not limited to, operation or use of tools or equipment, collecting debris and/or cleaning up the job site, making deliveries, unquote. Our Public Works Committee has unanimously recommended approval of the amendments to Chapter 215 and 500, all within Bill number 6125.
All right, thank you. I'd just like to point out, because I don't think the synopsis made it quite clear, but the bill would actually remove this from 215 and put it in. Right, so the changes would be made to section 500. The bill would strike this from 215.
Yes, sir.
All right,
we're doing.
my understanding is that Lisa would come right back on up here and tell us all about this one.
And sorry about the synopsis there. So I don't really have too much to say. So I'll make this very, very brief. So I think everything was already covered. Maybe only the couple things then to point out is then, again, I would just like to make clear then that the prescribed construction hours that would remain would be hours from Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. until 6 p.m. and on Saturday from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. And one of the other items that was not included in the synopsis, but that the committee wanted us to look at was to perhaps strengthen for the municipal court to decide that if there's an infraction of this ordinance, that the general contractor also has to accept some liability here, because what we have been hearing when we kind of get into these situations, which doesn't happen too frequently, but when we do, a lot of times we have a situation then when we have a subcontractor that says, well, yeah, it was me and I didn't know I couldn't show up till such and such time. So that was another amendment, was to section 500.080, that just also adds that the general contractor shall be responsible for complying and ensuring all workers are complying with all provisions contained in that article. I think otherwise everything else was captured, so. Any questions, or?
Alderman Lockmiller?
Lisa, so prior to this, it was within 1,000 feet of residential. So now this would be citywide.
So, yes, this is citywide, so even people, for instance, that would be disturbed by commercial construction activity, we would take a look at that. Again, your hours would be regulated on commercial construction jobs, so.
So if they're deep within the industrial park doing something, they're under these guidelines, under these hours.
Yes. They would also have to comply with those hours, that's correct.
Thank you.
Alderman Kramer?
Yes, Your Honor. Just, I guess, a point of clarification and also maybe perhaps a highlight as well. I don't recall the year at all, but there was a time when myself and Alderwoman Cross co-wrote the residential construction requirements, and part of that had to do with the hours of construction to try to help our residents who, the amount of complaints, the list was growing on various cases and forms. One of those that this seeks to perfect, which we didn't envision at that time. By the way, a lot of the wording came from the city of Clayton, was the sound of diesel. And the diesel, the complaints, Your Honor, came from the residents who said, we're not complaining about the noise coming from the job site, we're complaining about the trucks lined up on the street before the hours begin. And I believe this takes care of that now, is that correct?
That's correct, because we did also include a better definition of job site, and this is going to pertain more to residential areas, but that, again, we are talking about the job site to be where the actual construction, the parcel is taking place, and the adjoining roadways. So if you did have a delivery truck that's idled on the street, that would be a problem.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Any further questions? I had one. I noticed you made the general contractor liable, which I think is great. In a case where a homeowner is doing their own thing, would they be liable for their subcontractors? Under the definition of a general contractor, does that fall in here or not?
So it depends, I guess, if the activity actually falls in one of those three scenarios that are in the code right now. So if the homeowner, though, does hire his own contractor, I don't know if that's still a homeowner would be considered a general contractor. Can I defer that one to you?
Sure.
Okay.
I don't think they are.
I would encourage the board to consider an amendment before we take this up for final passage. Anyway, all right, thank you.
So, would a suggestion then?
Well,
that a
no, my
hearing be
point is
to-
simply that, look, if I've got a general contractor, that's great to hold him liable, right? But if I don't have a general contractor, if I'm acting as my own GC, and now my subs are out there causing all these problems, well, I'm not liable, it's my sub, he did it, right? I'm the property owner, not a general contractor, so Unless the definition of general contractor includes the property owner.
Well, I would think any owner ought to be jointly and severally liable.
I would like it to be explicit, yeah. I agree.
We'll play with some
Clarify.
of this wording for
Yeah.
a second reading.
No, I would agree entirely. I'm just saying, that's great in a case where a developer's bought a house and they're doing the usual thing, but in a case where I've torn down half my house and I'm putting up a new half of my house, you may not be able to hold me liable for some other guy that's doing that.
Yeah, I can show Bull I had owner liability margin note already.
And
We'll have some suggestions.
Way ahead of me as usual.
We'll have some suggestions at second reading.
Yeah, this does need to be polished. We need a few whereases.
He gets paid by the whereas, so we're good. Alderman Lockmiller.
Lisa, I can think of one problem we've got going on with a certain sewer line going in and a pump running 24/7. Are there exceptions that permit that to go on?
Are you
Because that's a
talking about
diesel-powered.
south,
Excuse
the
me.
MSD,
Yeah.
or, okay. So now, the one thing with the MSD, the Project Clear, is that there are some additional conditions or requirements that were included in an agreement between the city and MSD. So even the hours are different, and they still have to request if they work on a Saturday, which right now the ordinance actually, allows other people to work on Saturdays between 10 to 4, but they have to get clearance on that. So it is a little bit different just because we have that agreement with MSD for that particular project in that phase 1.
And so that discretion would fall with you when it comes to those type of hours and.
Well, no, I'm sorry, I probably misled you there. So the hours are actually written into the agreement.
Okay.
So they have to abide by the hours, but there is just one provision in the agreement that if they would want to work on Saturdays, I think from 10 to 3:30, they still have to get permission from the director of planning. But that would be covered under our code anyway, but that's also specified in the agreement.
I'm not familiar with the terms of the agreement, but I think if you ask MSD, they will tell you they're a governmental entity and they are not subject to our regulations.
If I may interject, we negotiated with MSD for several months, so we do have an agreement, several pages long, and they were very upfront on, what the project would entail, the inconvenience that perhaps the neighborhood would have to suffer through as a result of this project, and the accommodations that they would make. So the city knew upfront what the scope of the project would be, and the only optional part there would be what Lisa indicated, that they would have to seek the approval of the planning and development director if they were going to work Saturdays or Sundays. And they've pretty much kept up with that, and the inconveniences that the neighborhood has suffered, I think one person in particular, we've tried to work a lot to make sure that that person wasn't inconvenienced monetarily, is how they've been able to resolve those issues.
It always seems to work. Thank you.
What do you know? Cash fixes things. Huh, what do you know? All right. Any further questions? Thank you, Lisa. You're almost done. All right, item 11F.
Yes.
Is bill number 6127. Mr. City Attorney, first reading by title only, please.
Bill number 6127, first reading, an ordinance approving and authorizing execution of service agreements with Thuvino Wade and Morshan, Inc.
That's the whole title?
Yes.
Awesome.
Well, there's parenthetical TWM, Inc. but-
Alderman Kramer.
Yes, Your Honor.
Synopsis, please.
Further enhancement on that
Yeah,
title.
yeah.
Bill number 6127, our first reading this evening, covers the agreement with TDW on Manchester Road, Route 100, enhancement to the MoDOT project, and it's an agreement with that TWM Incorporated for engineering services associated with Manchester Road and those project enhancements. Our city, in conjunction with the Missouri Department of Transportation, which covers Manchester Road pavement improvements and the project there, and the limits from Lindbergh Boulevard to Big Bend Boulevard, request a separate contract with TWM Incorporated, the lead design engineer for the Manchester Road pavement improvements project. The work scope includes developing access management control to properties along Manchester Road, enhancing pedestrian lighting, traffic signal equipment, a possible crosswalk there at Manderley Drive, wayfinding signage, bus shelters, coordinating with the city's landscape architect, preparing federal reimbursement applications, preparing cost estimates, and investigating the feasibility of reconfiguring Mary Avenue and Dorothy there with regards to the future Great Rivers Greenway Gloria Rogers Parkway Underpass project. The Public Works Committee recommends unanimously to the Board of Aldermen the consideration of an ordinance approving the execution of a service agreement with Vilvano, Wade, and Merchant Incorporated, otherwise known as TWM Incorporated, related to project enhancements for the Manchester Road Improvements Project. This is Bill number 6127.
All right, thank you. And I think we've got Director Gummersheimer. And I've been told that if you need an assist from Director Kirkmeyer, she's right behind you.
Okay. I know we discussed this at the Public Works meeting, and the synopsis pretty much covered the description of the project. MoDOT's basically just doing a mill and fill. You know, they're going to take about 2 inches of asphalt off, they'll put new asphalt down, restripe, they'll add ADA compliant sidewalks where necessary. But what they don't actually cover would be like control access points, so they're not really going to worry about changing curb cuts and things like that. If we want it, like for our limits or other cities, say Rock Hill or Kirkwood, they would need to take that on themselves. Same thing with pedestrian lightings. They're not going to add any more lights. We would need to take that on. Other enhancements, we already mentioned wayfinding, signage, traffic signals. It would just be a standard galvanized steel post with your lights. If we want to make it look like, say, Maplewood has a powder-coated steel, like a black, that would be on us because that's an enhancement. So same thing in the synopsis, bus shelters, you know, any landscaping, anything of that nature, anything that's an enhancement. Basically, this is a bare bones resurfacing project. So they're not going to relocate any utilities, special, or anything
So
of
we've
that
only
nature.
got the basic street package, and if we want anything else, we have to upgrade the basic street package.
Right, and it's tens of millions of dollars just for what they're doing. Anything additionally, of course, would have to be either at our cost or some other municipality, whatever area they're doing the work in. Just off the top of my head here, it says there's 294 parcel acquisitions. So this is going to be a multi-year project. So 2017, they have Tuvino, Wade, and Morrison under contract to do preliminary plans. 2018 would be land acquisitions. 2019, finalization of plans, eventually bidding. You won't see construction until probably 2020, assuming that they have all their funding and move forward at a normal pace.
All right. Other questions for Director Gummersheimer? Alderman Weggie.
I like Dr.
Can you explain that parcel acquisition? Has nothing to do with this really, but
It
why
would be
they
for
need
like
that?
temporary construction easements, permanent easements, kind of like with Hanley Industrial Court. So if they need to widen the sidewalk, there may not be adequate right-of-way.
Okay.
Same thing with working space. It's like, well, just because you can permanently put the sidewalk there, you know, the contractor may have to step 2-3 feet into a private parcel's boundary.
Do you know if there's any acquisition within Brentwood?
I don't know personally. I'm sure there has to be. I mean, I know we've met with TWM, we've met with MoDOT. I don't know the number of parcels, but we will be getting to that as the preliminary plans are designed.
Okay.
So TWM is under contract with MoDOT. They'll start doing their preliminary work in May of this year, and then they'll progress until October, November of this year when they've finalized preliminary design.
Okay.
But they'll be getting input from all the communities that are impacted and keep us abreast of the schedule and things of that nature.
Will we see that plan come through here? Or that preliminary design when it's done in November?
I would assume.
Yes, it will go to Public Works and then the Board of Aldermen, absolutely. And we hope to have a town hall type meeting so that those who are impacted will also have a chance to see that. Part of what we would be asking TWM to do, is that TWM, is to undertake in partnership with the city these town hall type meetings, 2, 3.
I believe they upped it to 4, and I know
4.
that they also included like engineers' estimates, you know, opinion of probable cost. So if we say we want pedestrian lighting, comes in too expensive, you don't have to develop it any further.
And we have the flexibility based on input to make changes along the way.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Alderman Leahy.
Thank you, sir. Dan, what I'm looking at is, MoDOT wants to just rip up Manchester Road 2 inches and re-asphalt. What we're looking at is, do we want to go from the swale curb to a square curb? Do we want to put a better sidewalk in? That's on the city.
No, on the curbing, they will be addressing that. They'll add some storm sewer to help that road drain.
Drain better.
They're not going to mitigate the flooding, you know, they're not going to do certain other improvements. As far as the sidewalk, they do have to comply with, you know, typically 5-foot sidewalks. And they have to do the ADA, you know, the little truncated domes on the ramps
To
and
work
things
with.
like that. Same thing with your traffic signals, those have to have ADA compliant buttons. And they have to do the little countdown and the audio and visual cues that are necessary. But what it wouldn't get you is like, I know Great Rivers Greenway wants to reconfigure Mary and Dorothy, so they don't care about that, but we do. It is important to us to do the underpass and things of that nature. So this will help us using TWM to incorporate those concepts.
Thank you.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Okay. Thank you for the photos. They're helpful, but I have a question on the
Sure.
one with eastbound Manchester. The galvanized steel change to something more attractive isn't going to do anything for attraction as long as the electrical lines and the poles are there. There's no way to get rid of those, is there?
Well, as part of their scope, they will look at a probable cost. I mean, it's going to be a high-level estimate, but we would have to fund, if we wanted to bury Ameren lines, if it's even feasible, certain voltages cannot be buried underground. And there's other, you know, utilities that are partnered on those poles, such as Charter and things like that. So you could possibly reroute it overhead cheaper around some of those parcels, but that would be part of the planning process to figure out what's feasible and what's not.
Manchester Road is much more attractive in places where the utilities are buried. This is not pretty.
We have not spoken, if I may speak, to Ameren just yet to determine what the estimated cost to bury that would be. So we are still hopeful that maybe if it's reasonable, we can include it in part of our grant, because we will be applying for a grant to pay 80% of the city's share of the enhancement. And if it's something that's feasible and economic to do, then we would be submitting it. If it's not, then the city would have to determine just how much they want to underwrite, or how much we want to underwrite to bury it.
Thank you.
Yeah, just for the board's information, so Paige Selby is our Ameren rep
Yep.
for the city, who you all get a chance to meet at the end of this month when we go to the Cardinal game. But I asked her just, you know, off-the-cuff conversation. We got one of their engineers involved, and, you know, just talking about the possibility of burying power lines in general. I think we were talking about Brentwood Boulevard instead of Manchester, but it's roughly the same thing. And it's, you know, a rule of thumb that the engineers in the field use is about $1 million a pole. So if you go and count the poles
Every
and then
50
multiply
feet.
by 1 million, that's the rough cost they use for burying the lines. Now, I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what the Ameren guys told me. And looking at some of the harder estimates that were proposed back in
2006.
what was that, Andy, when they looked at they looked at doing it all the way down the corridor?
We did Hanley, well, that was the 2003.
Okay,
for
so
the
looking at
Manchester
those
Road
numbers,
corridor.
that back of the envelope does not appear to be too far wrong. I mean, you know, it could be off by half, but even $500,000 a pole is a lot of money. It's unfortunate, but that's how it works. Alderman Leahy.
Historically, if we can also, burying the lines was one cost, but every homeowner or property business along has to pay to connect to that line then
Yeah.
afterwards. That is a cost that is not in Ameren's pocket. It goes onto your property people. And that is where we lost a lot of business owners for wanting us to do it.
Well, anyway, the point is, it's a tremendous project. I think it's worth considering. Don't get me wrong. If the guys from TWM are very good, and if they can figure out a way to do it economically, I'm all for it. But I just wanted to share that with the board by way of, that's a tiger you may not want to tickle. So, Alderman Kramer.
Your Honor, when we worked on the burying of the lines from the Gateway Fountain over to the Drury underneath Eager Road there, it was several $100,000.
It was.
But that was in an area that didn't flood very often. So waterproofing those same lines or different specifications might require heavier dose.
Like I said, that's what I was told.
Yeah.
The back of that's what they use as sort of their
can
rule
only
of
dream.
thumb. So, anyway, thank you very much. The other thing I would say to the board is that the advantage to using Tuna-Wade and Merchant is you're getting the guys who are engaged with MoDOT as their lead engineers on this. So you're getting a very tight integration with the project team that's running the project for MoDOT. So that's another advantage to doing this with this particular company.
We should mention that at the next meeting, May 15th, we will be bringing an agreement to hire Arcturus, ARCTURIS, and they will be part of the team that will help the city have meetings with MoDOT to make sure that we're following MoDOT's standard sign policy for the corridor in Brentwood. And then they will take that and try to sell that to other municipalities so that there's uniformity across Manchester Road. Now, each city will pay for their own branding unique to that municipality. But, we've heard about that through the comp plan update. We've heard the fact that we want to brand neighborhoods, districts. So I expect that upon approval by the board of that agreement, we'll be bringing something more comprehensive citywide at a much later day.
Your Honor, one last question.
Alderman Leahy.
Just for clarification, this is a service agreement, so it did not require us to go out for bids for competitiveness?
I believe that's correct.
That's correct.
You can't competitively bid engineering contracts anyway.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Item 11G, and the final item under number 11 on our agenda, is bill number 6128. Mr. City Attorney, first reading by title only, please.
Bill number 6128, first reading, an ordinance amending Chapter 305 of the Brentwood Municipal Code relating to the designation and duties of the city's traffic engineer.
All right, thank you. Alderman Kramer, synopsis, please.
Yes, Your Honor, Bill number 6128 covers the topic of our companion bill to the comprehensive citywide traffic calming program, an ordinance amending Chapter 305 of the Brentwood Municipal Code relating to the designation and duties of our city's traffic engineer, be it ordained by the Board of Aldermen or by others of the city of Brentwood, Missouri. The Public Safety Committee unanimously recommends to the Board of Aldermen a companion bill to the Traffic Calming Toolkit program. This bill would allow the Board of Aldermen to achieve flexibility while avoiding mandatory additional expense if, for example, a Director of Public Works happens not to be a professional engineer or PE. Our Public Safety Committee has reviewed and recommended unanimously the amendment to the Brentwood Municipal Code relating to the designation and duties of our city's traffic engineer, Bill number 6128.
All right, thank you. And Madam City Administrator, you have information for the board?
Thank you, Mayor Thornton. To be very redundant, this is a companion bill to the traffic calming toolkit program that came out of the Public Safety Committee back, I think, in March. The committee had spent several meetings considering this program that will be used or that may be used by residents who have concerns in regard to traffic issues throughout the city, and it allows the Public Works Department to undertake a review of their request, determine whether it meets specific requirements, and then offer a recommendation. In the city's immediate past, we have not had a full-time city engineer on staff. We have been using, through an on-call agreement, CBB as our traffic engineer, and of recent, that firm and the lead engineer expressed some concern about the liability that they would be undertaking and making recommendations to the city, and then having the city make decisions based upon that. So this amendment to the code gives the aldermen the flexibility, if the city were not to have a professional engineer on staff, that they will be able to designate other employees in the city from time to time to serve in that role.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for the city administrator? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to, there are no bills to be given a second reading this evening. There are no bills for first and second reading this evening, and we have no resolutions. So we will move along, to accounts against the city. Alderman Dimmitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've gone over the warrant list. There was a revised one. It increased by $200. It was in your box today. And I would recommend approval of the warrant list in the amount of $95,301.01.
Second, Your Honor.
It's been moved and seconded that the board approve the warrant list in the amount stated by Alderman Dimmitt. Is there any discussion? Alderman Lockmiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I kind of direct this question to you. It looks like CH2M Hill's been almost paid in full here. Do we got a glossy report coming our way?
You not only have a glossy report coming your way, you have, in fact, I just saw the draft of it Friday. So you will see that glossy report, and you will get it glossily presented to you at the workshop on the 13th.
I glossily await.
So, yeah. Other questions, other discussion about the warrant list? Okay, let's have a roll call, please.
Alderman Dimmitt,
Yes.
Alderman Kramer,
Yes.
Alderman Leahy,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderman Plufka,
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims,
Yes.
and Alderman Weggie.
Yes.
All right, sounds unanimous, so the bills are paid for another month. Item number 16, the reports of committees and department heads. Under my report, I am going to keep it brief because we're running long. A number of announcements to make. First is National Day of Prayer is this Thursday, May 4th. We're going to be having the observance of the National Day of Prayer for the Brentwood area right here in City Hall. Anyone from any faith is very welcome, and we'll be doing it from noon to 1 p.m. So come and pray with me and the rest of the Brentwood community if you get a chance. On Saturday, May 6th, we will be having a shred event over at the Brentwood Recreation Center from 9 to noon. So bring your documents, residents only. This is a service that's provided by the city of Brentwood for Brentwood city residents. So, but Brentwood residents, bring your documents, shred them up. And then right after you get your documents shredded, head on over to the fire department and library's open house, which will be from 11 to 1 o'clock. The library will kick off their summer reading programs. We're going to have the fire trucks out. There'll be tours of the fire truck. There'll be bicycle helmet sizing. The Red Cross is going to bring out their new disaster van. That's a great name for a vehicle. And then there's hot dogs, light refreshments, cookies, if I recall. So good time will be had by all. So come on out to the open house for the Brentwood Fire Department and Public Library. That's on May 6th from 11 to 1 p.m. Finally, on my announcements, we have on the 25th of May, which is Thursday, we're going to have the city of Richmond Heights is going to have a Memorial Day observance over at the Veterans Memorial in Richmond Heights. If you haven't been over there, it's a really nice facility out in front of the, what do they call it, the Heights there. That's really just a really nice thing, and they do a real nice ceremony over there. So if you get a chance, I encourage you to attend. The ceremony will start at 5:30 p.m., and the theme this year is going to be honoring women veterans. So I encourage you to show up and do that. On a personal note, I would encourage you all to send out best wishes for Sally Westerbarger. She had surgery today, and I hear that things went well, but if you get a chance to say a little prayer for her, that'd be great. Happy to see her back here on Thursday, I hope. So that's all I got. Public Safety Committee, Alderman Plufka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Public Safety meets May 18th in this room, either in this room or perhaps in the conference room across the hall. Thank you. 5:30.
5:30. Public Works, Alderman Leahy.
Public Works, we have two things. We have our next meeting is May 10th, a week from this Wednesday at 4:30 in the afternoon. And we have a Show Me Pace district update.
Yes.
They have now moved
they have now included.
And yes, from not only commercial, but also now reached out into the residential sections that they can help work financing.
There is an additional district, so there are 2 districts that are allowed in the state. So we will be bringing legislation allowing commercial businesses and residential component to participate in this program.
Fantastic.
Yes, it's actually, to help improve both efficiencies and promote green is a good thing.
I like it. All right, Director of Planning and Development. Hard to believe you'd have any more to tell us tonight, huh? Ways and Means Committee, Alderman Dimmitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a meeting Thursday at 6 o'clock here, and we also have in front of us 2 requests that came through Ways and Means at the last meeting, and they are both essentially write-offs. The first is in the amount of $664, and that is for an ambulance charge. A gentleman was billed by EMS for an ambulance, and he claimed he never got that it was stolen identity. He alleged that it was a long-lost relative who actually got the service and went ahead and gave the officials his name, and it's not the first time that this has happened to the gentleman by that same relative. And this person went ahead and filed a police report. He went to that extent to complain about that. So because he went to that extent, the committee went ahead and recommended to approve the write-off of that $664. The second request is a settlement of a personal injury claim by the law firm, the Onder Law Firm. They had a client that received, I think they settled the case for $8,000. They had medicals of over $4,000, and our charge for ambulance is one of them. If they paid all the medical providers everything that they would be entitled to, the plaintiff or the client would end up virtually with nothing. And under those circumstances, what they do is they reach out to the medical providers, ask them to reduce their charges, which is what they've done to us, and they've asked that we reduce our charge to a total of $331.12 from originally $600-something. So the committee has recommended that the board approve that reduction or that write-off as well.
Okay, so it sounds like should I take that as a motion?
If the chair would, yes.
Second?
All right, I'm going to take that as a motion to write off the EMS billing charges for the case of stolen identity, as was explained by Alderman Dimmitt. Let's take this as 2 separate motions. So that'll be the first one. It's been seconded by Alderman Plufka. Is there any discussion on the motion? Alderman Kramer.
Yes, Your Honor. If I could ask our city attorney a question specifically about this case, since the party known to have received the service has apparently been authenticated, is there not a way for us to bill that party instead of writing this off entirely?
Well, the first question is whether we write off the obligation of the person we're currently billing.
Okay.
I think traditionally, it's very difficult to prove the other person actually got the service. We have the person getting the bill says they did, and has filed a report to that, but aside from their statement, we don't have any proof that the other person got the service. It's difficult to prove.
Boy, Your Honor, that's just really troubling to me.
Perhaps we should consider putting a square on one of the ambulances. That way we can just get payment at the time till the service is delivered.
okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Do
theoretically,
we condition getting in or getting out?
I think we have more leverage on the inside, really.
So following up, Your Honor, has this relative now received any kind of city or police ticket or punishment?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that
certainly
one's
try-
better directed to Alderman Dimmitt. Do we have any information on that?
We do not have any information, I believe, on that, but we could certainly ask Chief Fitzgerald or Major McIntyre.
Chief Curtin's here. He looks like he might know something about that, or Chief Fitzgerald, either one.
The reason why I bring it up, Your Honor, is if during that process of prosecution, for example, there may be enough
Yeah,
to
well,
substantiate. Okay.
I mean, I think the city attorney's point's well taken, folks. The question before the board is
Yeah.
whether to waive the charge of the person that we have billed who
Right.
claims he did not receive the service.
I understand.
So that's really the question. I mean, anything besides that to go against whatever party would is sort of ancillary to the point that's under discussion. So, but to the extent you have information, let's hear it.
So Alderman Kramer, this has been going on for quite a while. It was really hard for me to decide how to approach this. I reached out to Stephanie Carr from City Attorney's Office, who advised us to go the route of the police report. Said it was enough for us to prosecute this individual if we ever determine that he has falsified this report. Okay? The problem is, this alleged family member is not the most upstanding individual in the world, and I doubt seriously there's any way to really go after him for anything. And Jim has more information on that. That's why I brought him up here as well.
In the attorney profession, we call that judgment proof.
Okay.
Or you can't get blood from a turnip.
Yes, of course, yeah.
This falls under the fire department, and we watch out for this kind of stuff pretty heavily. We rarely get these kind of write-off requests. It's very unusual that we have two at the same time. This gentleman, the first one, I truly believe he's telling the truth, for what that's worth, but when he filled out the police report, I believe that was a good faith effort and a way to hold him accountable for that. I just don't know that we're gonna have any luck going after this other person. I don't even know that we have any way to contact this other person.
Okay.
Well, at the risk of getting into the other person's criminal history, he's no stranger to the criminal justice system. In fact, he's done time in the penitentiary, I think 2 different stints.
Okay.
His brother, they're half-brothers, has been to the police department at least 3 times that I know of. He has submitted every document we've ever asked for. We brought him back in our holdover, fingerprinted him. He is who he says he is. And there's some question as to whether or not a tattoo on his neck is the same as his brother's. It's not. So we're fairly certain, at least as certain as we can be, that he was not the one that got in the ambulance. And it's a long, convoluted story as to how his brother got in the ambulance, which I'm sure nobody really wants to hear about.
Thank you for the
You're right.
information.
I don't know that this helps you with the question you raised, but this is an odd situation all the way around.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, so as I said, the question before the board is whether or not to waive the charges against the gentleman who was alleged to be billed in error for services he did not receive. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Great, we will waive the charges for the gentleman who was billed mistakenly. Alderman Kramer.
Do we need to do a roll call on that? No.
We have 2 of them.
Yeah, I know. I was going to move to the second one. I don't think we need to do a roll call.
Okay. As you like to say, it's money.
Yeah. I'm trying to save time. Alderman Kramer.
Your Honor, I'm sorry about extending
That's
that
okay.
time.
That's fine.
I just wanted to pass along from my point of view, if the city so seems it possible or wishes it to be so, I would think it would be favorable for the city if there is an opportunity to prosecute and seek the remuneration for this total, even if it is a lien on the property that this person owns. Just simply letting it go because you've got Keystone Cops at play here seems a little bit disingenuous for them and a shortage for us. So I just wanted to mention that, Your Honor.
Thank you.
It's very hard for us to put a lien on his condo in Jeff City.
Whatever the details may be. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Alderman Dimmitt also moved the waiver of a.
I don't think it's waiver.
It's not. It's a reduction of the bill to the client of Anders Shelton O'Leary and Peterson. Is there a second for that motion? All right, Alderman Plufko has seconded that motion, and is there any discussion on that? Alderman Leahy.
I find it interesting that the city of Brentwood is being asked to reduce the fee for life-saving prevent care, and the attorney's fees do not get reduced. I'm not in favor of such.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll do this one by show of hands. All in favor of granting the reduction to Anders, Shelton, O'Leary, and Peterson, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. All opposed? 1. Alderman Leahy, thank you. The motion carries. We will grant the reduction that's been requested. 16F, Mr. City Attorney, do you have any report?
No, sir.
All right. Madam City Administrator.
We have one.
Okay.
The settlement offer in regards to the police vehicle. I have asked who will be presenting that. Chief Fitzgerald.
Chief
Thank
Fitzgerald.
you. And the reason why we are presenting this, we want to be certain that the action that the city takes is consistent with what you would have us do.
Okay.
So I'm
Good,
assuming
Chief.
they have the report?
They do.
Okay. So the insurance company finally called us back, kind of out of the blue, after we've left numerous messages, 2 or 3 of us have. They'd like for us to settle with them with the car. They'd like to clear their desk off, so to speak. So our 2 offers is to take the check of about $14,000, which was the original offer for the totaling of the car. If we would like to keep the car to do any further investigation, they'll give us the salvage, which is about half of that. So that's our choice.
Okay. Are there any questions?
Any questions?
Seeing none. Alderman Kramer.
Your Honor, just a follow-up question, if it's possible, regarding any potential ongoing investigations. If we take the settlement offer, are we releasing the vehicle from any further question or opportunity for investigation by the car maker or by, yes?
Yes.
Well, they will own the vehicle at that point, so I would think that our investigation would be over.
Okay.
Because part of getting the check is turning the title over to them.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's their vehicle, not our vehicle.
Okay.
Alderman Dimmitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the event data recorder, the EDR, if we settle with Chubb, have we had an opportunity yet to download ourselves the data from the EDR? And if we haven't, would we then, when we turn over the title in the vehicle, we would no longer be able to do that? Is that correct?
That is correct. The insurance company could, but it would be out of our hands.
But we would not be able to go and have access to
That's
that
correct.
EDR?
Dan, do you know, is the data recorder in the vehicle right now?
Yes.
It's present?
The vehicle has not been touched by anyone.
How did Ford do their analysis?
I mean, since the analysis.
Oh,
it's
okay.
still-
I was like,
They still
Right.
have it.
okay.
So,
All right,
yes.
got it. Okay.
Well, what
Alderman Dimmitt, go ahead.
Thank you. But the data has been downloaded by Ford, correct?
Not to my knowledge.
What we have in terms of a statement from Chubb is, and I quote, however, based on our file, our auto technical specialist was in contact with Ford and did not find there was anything wrong with the pedal. That is what they say. They don't reference the event data recorder.
And they didn't tell us how they came about that knowledge.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Leahy.
All right. The 42-page police report that was provided to us, I went through very carefully, and Dan, your group did a very good job of documenting and pulling that report together. Thank you for sharing it with me, because I found it very educational. The statement that the pedal was looked at and found no problem. The problem I find in the report is at this accident scene, you have a car that is projected at, estimated at a 32-mile-per-hour speed that hits a concrete pillar in front of the vinyl fence that ends up at the toy arrangement. Okay, car's out of control and hits us. The airbags don't deploy. I'm under the impression, but since the event recorders weren't checked or anything, nobody's made an assessment as to why they did not deploy to work with. We speculate that it may be a carpet pad that the city put in because we have used the vehicle for a while and we're developing a hole, and that the pad may have slipped and it may have created a problem with the accelerator pedal. But unfortunately, it's speculation because there's nothing that supports or not support. The three other incidences that were reported after the fact may lead us in that direction, but they don't seem to give us anything conclusive. Settle with the insurance company, you're getting a little bit more than $14,000 for a crashed up vehicle. We need another vehicle in the police fleet. If we want to fight the case, you're waiting on Ford to decide when they want us to do any further investigations while we're still shorthanded a vehicle. I would recommend to the board that we do accept the settlement offer.
Okay, well, I was going to ask for a motion anyway, so I'm going to take that as a motion.
Yes, sir, that is a motion.
It's been moved and seconded that the board accept the settlement offer from Chubb in the amount of $14,000. Now we can have a discussion.
Add pennies, yeah.
Well, whatever.
Yeah.
Alderman Wade.
So, we're kind of offered with two options here. One is to take the settlement, and that's the end of it, right? So I think I personally am very unsatisfied with the result of this, right? I mean, my kids play on that playground. There's a lot of mystery around this, so I don't think we reached a conclusion. So if we do take option number 2, what are our options to pursue that? What other investigative techniques can we take? What else can we do to find out what happened here?
Well, you could go after the event data recorder.
So,
You can expedite the process. If we wait for Ford to do that, it could be eons.
The city would have to hire its own engineer.
You'd have to go
or
outside.
a specialist to retrieve the event data recorder, analyze it, and then we would be able to provide the board what.
And as
what
far as
what
that's concerned, you could evaluate the car in any way you
Exactly.
see fit.
So we would have to, right, we don't have that skill set in Brentwood, obviously, and there'd probably be a conflict of
Do
interest
you?
anyway. So
Okay.
we would have to go find an external.
Exactly. I think it's a specialized skill to do that.
So I'll just share this with the board because it seems relevant. So in the course of my attorney wanderings, there are guys with laptops that can connect up to the EDR, pull the data off, and then we'll do an analysis on that data. It takes some specialized software that I don't think, I don't have, and Dan doesn't have, and I don't think anybody has here, but the software is not extremely complex. It's just, you have to know the protocol and you have to be able to access the recorder. So we would, presumably, if you want to get, that information, you could hire somebody to do that. It's been a while, but my recollection is the cost was in the neighborhood of $3,000-ish the last time I had to do it.
Right, even if we bring in somebody to do that, what do we think that data might show? Right, it's gonna tell us possibly why the airbag didn't deploy. It might tell us if the accelerator was being pressed or not, if the brakes were applied.
So it's very similar to a flight data recorder in that it will tell you what the internal systems were recording all along the way. So if the car thought that the accelerator was being depressed, then it will be recorded in the event data recorder that, the engine was receiving input to go, right? If, the brake was applied, similarly, you'll see that the car thought the brakes were being applied. I don't know about airbags deploying. I've never had that. I've had it only in the context of stopping distances and that sort of thing. I presume the same data would be available.
Assistant Chief McIntyre did some research, and he could speak to the airbags if the mayor would recognize him.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, Board of Aldermen, I'll just read you what the research on it, and basically the proprietary nature of airbag deployment is pretty specific to the brand. Unlike crash test simulators, real-world crashes typically aren't front and center. A lot of times they're underneath or to the side. There are a number of sensors that are on there. Because airbag sensors measure deceleration and not vehicle speed or crash impact, or what they call crush, speed is not a good indicator of airbag deployment. So basically anecdotally, I've seen vehicles at 45 miles an hour, would seem to be a front impact, no airbag. I've seen them at parking lot speeds, airbag deployed. It just measures deceleration rather than speed and crush, if that helps.
Any further discussion on the motion? Alderman Kramer.
Just a question, Your Honor. Madam City Administrator, this offer expires after a certain period of time? If we accept, do we have a time frame within which we'll still have the vehicle, or how immediate is this?
I'm reading the letter that they sent to the city, and there really is no expiration date.
Yeah,
On
again,
here.
I think I can help on this. So what they're asking us to do is settle the insurance claim.
Yeah.
We have a property, we have a property claim against them. They're asking us to settle. So we can go back and say, hey, you're not offering us enough for our car, we want more. We can, we can accept the settlement offer and give them the car, or we can take the money and keep the car, and then we have whatever salvage value the car is worth. And that's kind of
The only reason I brought it up, Your Honor, is because perhaps the city could communicate to the carrier that we plan on delivering the vehicle to you on this date, whatever that date is. And before that date, if the alderman chose, they could embark on a reading of the information to use for whatever they wanted to use it for.
Yeah.
I'm just-
Yes, I believe that would be option number 3, yes.
Okay.
Depending on how quickly you could get somebody to do it.
Yes.
However, the motion on the table is to accept the offer, so. If there's any further discussion on that motion, if not, we'll put it to a vote. Okay, so the motion on the table is to accept the offer of $14,000 and change and turn the car over to the insurance company. I'm going to do a roll call on this one.
Was there a second?
Yes.
Yes, Alderman Plufka seconded.
Oh, okay.
Or no, Alderman Lockmiller seconded.
Yeah, it was Steve.
Alderman Kramer seconded. My fault, yes. My fault.
Steve.
It's been a long meeting, yeah, sorry. All right, so roll call, please.
Alderman Demmett,
No.
Alderman Kramer,
Aye is not a vote.
No.
Alderman Leahy,
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller,
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill,
Yes.
Alderman Plufka,
No.
Alderwoman Sims,
No.
and Alderman Weggie.
No.
Did I count 5-3?
Yes.
3-5.
All right, so the motion fails. So, in lieu of that, we are still owners of a wrecked car. What would the board like to do, or would you just like to leave this until next meeting? Alderman Kramer.
Your Honor, I would like to propose a new motion. I don't know what success I'll get a second, but I sensed there was some opportunity here that the city accept the proposed settlement amount as stated, with the stipulation that the city communicate to the carrier that the vehicle will be turned over within a 45-day time period. During that 45-day time period, the city may wish to investigate the vehicle further.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure
Or
we
just
can
put
take
the-
that motion up because, yeah, I
Just a
know what you're trying
45-day
to.
time period.
Yeah, I guess what I would suggest
We don't
is.
have the vehicle in our possession.
Yeah.
So what we would be asking for is for them to allow us to do further investigation and then decide whether we want to take one of the two offers. I mean, we could definitely ask them.
Okay.
I doubt very seriously they would entertain that. You know?
Well,
Because
it's our
take the
car.
vehicle, take the vehicle, do the
They're done.
evaluation.
Well, they're done with their investigation, right?
It's our vehicle, we just don't have it in our
Presence.
to it.
presence. That's the motion, Your Honor, and I would also be willing to amend that motion just to include the time frame only and not the stipulation to the examination.
Okay.
No second.
I'm not, well, then, I'm sorry, I'm just not sure that the motion's appropriate, because you're proposing that we do something that we just voted not to do at a future time. I'm not really sure that.
I just included the time frame, which
Sure, no, I
otherwise would have been
understand.
immediately,
I
here's your
understand.
car.
I guess what I would propose is, if your goal is to have staff try to get a hold of the data, then I would make a motion to direct staff to do that and not worry about whether or not you're accepting the offer until after you find out whether or not that's a doable thing.
Your Honor, I would agree to amend that motion and would love to, with a question to the city administrator, did we get a communication that this offer is only good for a certain period of, okay,
It doesn't mention that.
okay.
And it's not. It's an insurance. I mean, we have a claim, we have a property claim for as long as it's not settled.
All right, Your Honor, I'd like to revise my motion and rescind the previous one to state that the city would like to retain the vehicle for further investigation.
Okay, that one's gonna die for lack of a second.
Okay.
Alderman Wagey.
Well, I think, I basically support that. I think we need to give a little more direction to staff.
Go ahead.
Basically, I mean, retain it for future investigation. I would direct staff, let's figure out a next step of what that next investigation is. If it's hiring a service to do that, pulling the event data recorder information, let's direct them to get a quote for that. If we need to put the car in the quarantine, I think we need to give clear direction. I have no idea what that direction is, to look at this.
Alderman Leahy.
Is it possible, Your Honor, just to simply direct staff to request to the insurance company to provide the city of Brentwood with the event recorder data prior to us deciding what to do with the car? Ask them if it's available and if they can send us a
We
copy.
can direct staff to do anything we want. Whether or not the insurance company will do that, I can tell you right now, there's no insurance company in the world that I'm familiar with that will do that. So, I mean, they don't have it.
We have to do it.
Then I guess we direct staff to request to the insurance company access to our own vehicle to download this information.
That would get closer to the mark.
Second.
I'm going to take that as a motion because it got a second.
Okay.
So,
We're making progress.
yeah. All right, so I'm going to try to restate the motion. You correct me if I got it wrong. So it's been moved and seconded that the board direct staff to take possession of the vehicle and to obtain.
To have access to the vehicle,
Well, hold on. Let me, before I start this whole thing, let me ask a question. So, Madam City Administrator, I take it, or maybe this is better directed to the chief. Chief, are they done with this thing? Is this?
They are done.
Yes.
Yes.
The insurance company and Ford, they're done with this, right? They're no longer, so as far as they're concerned, this is just a hunk of metal that belongs to us and we can do whatever we want.
Right.
Okay.
It's
So
still
that's what I
shrink-wrapped.
thought. So we don't need to ask anybody's permission. They're very willing to give us this hunk of crashed up car and we can do whatever the hell we want with it.
For a value of $7,600 something.
No. I mean, that's what they'll pay us if we choose to
Salvaged
keep,
owner.
but it's
Right.
our hunk of metal right now. We still own it.
But it's not here.
Yeah, but we can, I mean, it's ours. We can get it anytime we want. We're
Yes.
entitled to.
Tow it back here.
Yes. So,
Yeah, I understand.
are you with me so far?
I'm listening.
I'm just trying to, I'm trying to facilitate here. So, your motion is to direct staff to take possession of the vehicle and then obtain the recorder data, or was that part of it or not?
Yes.
Okay. Direct staff to take possession of the vehicle, obtain the recorder data, and get a quote for an analysis and the retention? To get a quote for the recorder data and the analysis thereof.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Does that work?
Second.
Yes.
That's the motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I have a question.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Quickly.
Yes.
If this car is at point A, can we ask someone to do this service and go to point A and do it and leave the car there? Do we actually have to
For a
have
fee.
possession of the car here?
Is it still at Suntrup, Dan?
No, the insurance company impounded.
Okay, so they have it in their impound.
Yeah.
So I think at some point they'll ask us to move our car out of their impound. Yeah, that's what they're trying to do right now. So they'll give us, if we want to go get our car, they'll give us $7,000 to close the claim.
Well, then we're giving up our right for the full,
Yes.
Yeah, but we also have some, well,
but can't we just not take the settlement at all? We'd take our car
you not take your money, you can take the car.
and then trade it in later for a check for 14,000.
Yes?
I said earlier, I don't believe we can do both. It's got to be one or the other. It's got to be one or the other.
That's why I was asking.
The legal
can't we
minds,
go
these
there
should
and-
take charge here, because you're out of
No,
my league.
I don't think the insurance company has given us a choice. They will take title to the car for 14 grand. If we want to get the car, they will give us 7,000 and close out the claim.
But it's
But it's our own
still
car.
our car.
Yes.
It is. And if,
So we're entitled to possession of our property.
Once we take one of the two options.
No, you don't have to do any options. It's still
exactly.
our property.
Exactly.
well,
That's my contention.
I'm asking, I'm not telling, I'm just,
I don't know if they would, I would expect that their valuation and the offer would be withdrawn.
Yes.
Once we've withdrawn it from their care.
That's an
Yes.
important part of the question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's why the original request, Your Honor, was to get their permission to go in and download the data.
Because if
Okay,
if
well,
it suffered more damage, whatever.
I hear you.
Should we ask the question before the board directs staff to take any action? Whether they would be
As
amenable
long
to
as they
that?
won't rescind the offer in the meantime,
Well,
yes.
they may.
Perhaps if the motion was to instruct staff to assess whether the city can obtain the event data recorded information and analysis and report at the next meeting.
I will make
So
that
moved.
Second.
Oh, we have to move the previous motion.
yeah, so
With-
you're going to withdraw that previous motion? Thank you, that works. It's been moved and seconded that, what Kevin said. Is there any discussion? I'm sorry, it's 9:30, let's go.
Did someone make a motion?
Yes, Kevin did.
First?
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Great. Then the staff's going to find out if we can get that information and report back to the board, right?
Yes.
Great. Wow,
Excise.
that was all under the city administrator's report. Mr. Excise Commissioner, any report?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Madam Library Liaison.
Yes, very brief. The after-school problem still exists in the library with many of the teenagers coming and hanging out here forever. One of the problems is the computers. There are 8. The staff is thinking of putting some sort of limit on how the time frame and how many of those can be accessed by the students so that other patrons have a chance to use them. If you have any comments, feelings, or anything, please take them up with the library staff.
All right. Municipal League, I have nothing to report. Chief, we got anything from the Historical Society? Nope. All right. Any announcements? Alderman Wade.
Just real quick, I thought the storm portal painting thing, they looked fantastic. I thought that looked well cooperated, so I think it was a success. Thanks.
Yes. I've had lots of favorable comments, by the way.
Good.
Yeah, excellent job. Alderman Leahy.
Ward 3 meeting for the month of May will be May 30th, Tuesday night at 7 PM up here in the council room.
All right, Ward 3 meeting. Anyone else? Seeing none. New business? I don't think we have any. Alderman Leahy.
Your Honor, I've noticed that on Magdalen Avenue at Brentwood Boulevard, there is some new street markings of measurements and stuff. I am anticipating Magdalen Avenue is on the 2017 list. They have a parish picnic the weekend of the 19th and 20th of May. Parking is going to be a premium, and you're going to have a lot of foot traffic. I just wanted to make the city aware that we don't start tearing up the street right in the middle of the school.
We will not be. We need to make sure that it's not Missouri American or any other. It is Missouri American.
Can we at least let them know that there's something going on and that that may cause more problems than good?
We will.
Thank you.
All right. Any hearing of any matter of public interest upon the interest of any person present? Anyone care to come up and address the board? You're still awake? Come on up. All right. Seeing none, we do have a closed meeting on tonight's agenda, so the chair would entertain a motion to enter into a closed session. Alderman Plufka.
Mr. Mayor, I propose that we go into closed meeting pursuant to Missouri Revised Statute, Chapter 610, Section 021, Subsection 3.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the board enter into closed session pursuant to RSMO 610-21-3. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call, please.
Alderman Demmett.
Yes.
Alderman Kramer.
Yes.
Alderman Leahy.
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes.
Alderman Plufka.
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Wiggy.
Yes.
Your Honor, may we further adjourn from the closed session and adjourn from the regular meeting
Yes,
at that point?
I was just about to announce to everybody. So we will be adjourning this meeting from the closed session, so you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. No, just kidding. There won't be anything further to see here. So thanks for coming, and board, we will reconvene at 9:30 in the conference room for our closed session.